welcome to today's demo. So today we are going to be working on the world of pens. So I have decided to grab all my pens from my drawer and talk about all of the different ones and all of the different amazing things that you can do with them because there are so many. And I also have a couple brand new pens in here that I haven't even played with yet, and I figured that we could play with those together. Well, there's one more in here, there's another one, but I guess we'll play with those and we'll just see what happens. Oh, it's this one. This is it. These are two new pens I haven't even played with yet. Figured we would play with those together. So, all right. So, first off, let's just get started with some really basic stuff. Okay. So, this demo is going to be talking about pens and markers, all of the different writing utensils. The one that I use pretty regularly is going to be probably the Tombow marker, where you have your bullet point on one side, and then you have your brush tip on the other side. I think I actually forgot to grab a brand new one of these, but you get the same kind of idea, where you get the thicker line and the thinner line, which is really great for doing like doodling and things, because you can go in and add like your detail marks, which is really fun. But you can also take the same marker, and Tombows come in a variety of colors. I would say every color of the rainbow. And then on a craft mat, you can always color with those, and then you can do watercolors with them, which is kind of cool. And I found actually that the black Tombow almost has a blue tone to it, which is really interesting. But you can take your marker, and you always do, because you're working in the tone on tone, you can do a wash, kind of a background. And then after you've done your background with your watercolor, after it dries, I'm going to make it turn over it really quick. I remember the first time I used the black Tombow when I did this, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's not the effect I was trying to go for. Because I was actually looking for more of a gray tone. But then you can go back in and you can do like your doodling, and you can do things kind of around that, but then you have kind of a fun background to work with, and you're kind of working on kind of a tone on tone world, which is kind of a fun way to go. So I always like playing with that kind of idea. But then, so that's kind of a standard, it's called a Tombow marker. And for the world of people doing watercolors, or if you're doing card making, most of my customers use Tombows and are very familiar with them. They're just wonderful. Now this is the gray one, and let's just see, because I remember when I used this one last, my grays, I'm using a little bit different. I wanted to see what this one do. All right, and this gray does land a little bit more of a traditional gray. So if you're working in your, so when you're playing with your pens and you're wanting to kind of see how it's going to blend out, sometimes what I'll recommend doing is coloring it on your craft mat, and then maybe creating a color palette of, hey, this is what the color looks like when it's diluted, so in that way, as you're matching colors, you can see which colors are going to blend nicely together if you're going to do watercolors, which I thought was really cool too. Okay, so that's just some really basic stuff. All right. Now, almost every single person here watching here in person is going to have a plain basic pen. Living in Bellingham, they're mostly Weeku pens, right? You see a lot of the Weeku pens. So even though it's just like a very plain basic pen, right? I'm just gonna write the word hello here. You can use your pens, again, it's just basic, that's what everyone has. But in the world of art, did you know you can heat emboss with a standard pen? Marilyn was actually the first person to ever tell me this, someone who used to work at that Stamp-A-Doodle. And honestly, I was like, no, there's no way. Because when you're doing heat embossing, the ink needs to stay wet long enough to hold embossing powder in place. So when you're using just a standard basic pen, and we'll just write a little message like, hi friend. Let's see, we'll just write something. I'm writing this on black paper, so no one can see it right now. Then I can take my embossing powder, sprinkle it on top of where I've written, shake off my excess, and check that out. The embossing powder sticks to all the areas where your pen was. So that means that if you have a really, the other embossing pen is the Versamarker. The Versamark pen has two different tips on it, but neither of those tips are going to be as fine point as a standard ballpoint pen, which when I learned that information, it totally blew my mind. So then we can heat emboss this, and it really comes to life. So and so if you don't have a gold pen at home, but you're wanting to create kind of a gold effect on a card or something, it is really, really easy to do that with just a standard pen and your embossing powder, which again, I was totally blown away when I learned that information. I was like, wow, what a concept. So because the ink stays wet long enough to do heat embossing, my thought was, what about Pearlex powder? Because Pearlex powder with a Versamark pen bonds to that. So the Versamark pen is just a clear ink. So I'm going to show you the Versamark pen for those of you that are not familiar. The Versamark pen, again, much like the Tombow, has two different tips on it. So you have the thick line, and then you also have your thin line. And I know you guys can't see this right now because we do have, it's on white paper and it's clear ink. So this is an oil-based pen, which means it stays wet long enough to do heat embossing, just like we were doing over here. So I'm just going to do some heat embossing for those of you that are not familiar. This is really cool too, because then your own handwriting can be heat embossed. I remember the very first time I ever made a card for Taylor. It was really funny. I wrote a little message for him, and I think I wrote like "I love you" or something like that. And he looked at it and he said, "Is this your handwriting?" It's like, "It looks like hot lava." And I was like, "I know, isn't it amazing?" Because I had just learned about doing embossing powder, and the fact that your own handwriting can be embossed is just a really fun thing to do. So you get that really cool embossed effect. But what's really cool about, whoops, that wasn't quite dry yet. What's really cool about doing embossing though is that then it's totally waterproof. So you can do your writing or your shape, and then you can do watercolors around it, and the lines aren't going to go anywhere or move. But just being able to have your own handwriting embossed is something that I just absolutely love. I know you've already seen this technique, Margo, but I'm still going to show you anyway. Okay, so now let's talk about doing the same technique of doing the embossing, but doing it with, instead of doing embossing powder, but we're going to use the same pens, we're just going to use Pearlex powder. So I'm actually going to take this guy right here. Oh, I forgot to grab scissors. Never mind. I'll do this on this sheet. Okay, so I'm going to take my standard just writing pen again, and I'm going to try, because again the ink stays wet longer, I'm just going to see what's going to happen here. Alright, so now I'm just going to take some of my Pearlex powder, and Pearlex powder is just a powdered mica. And I'm just going to brush that across here. I'm just going to see if this is going to pop out. Yes, it is. Not only is the Pearlex powder landing in all the little crevices, but it's also bonding and sticking to the pen, the ink from the pen. So that's just a really cool idea, because then again you can get that kind of gold writing, but there's nothing, no heat gun isn't required or anything like that. And you can always take a paper towel and kind of just buff out the excess. But look at that. Look how clean that is. That is amazing, and I just used Pearlex powder. Pearlex powder comes in so many colors, and you can even create like some fun little drawings and little doodles. I'm just going to create something kind of fun here. But also, this is a really great, so you guys can't really see what I've drawn here, but this is a really cool idea if you're wanting to have invisible ink, for example, and you want like kids to like bring out the colors or bring out the writing so they can reveal the message. This would be a really fun activity, because you could draw something and then give them a little bit of Pearlex powder and say, hey, why don't you reveal the secret message? I'm also doing a couple different colors here just to show that you don't necessarily need to have only one color, and it's actually even more fun to have kind of two colors. Again, I'm just going to kind of brush away any excess with my paper towel here, and you can easily see how that totally stands out. Again, just using a standard pen and Pearlex powder, or mica powder is another name for that. It's really kind of a cool idea. Okay, now we're going to go in. I'm going to use my water brush again. I'm just going to do a little bit of watercoloring here because I have an idea for later. I want to get this down now. So I'm going to pick a nice dark color. So I think I'm just going to pick a black here for my watercolors. Now this was an idea that I had actually seen someone else do online, and I thought, oh, I love that concept. So I'm actually going to kind of do my own take on it here. I love the idea of doing dots. Whenever I'm not sure what to do, I'll just like do little dots of color, and then I'll just get inspired and say, oh, maybe I'll try this, I'll try this. But when you're doing this next technique, you're gonna really want nice dark colors. And let's see if I can go mix up blue black. To be just a touch dark here. And we'll have to heat set this to dry it, so that way we're not waiting around for the ink to dry. I'm mixing the colors a little bit, but that's okay. Whoa, goodness, I almost knocked over that whole bottle of embossing powder. All right. Watercolor always ends up being not as dark once the color's dry, but that's okay. Okay, now I have two white pens here. Oh, it's not quite. Oh, it's probably not as good as it's going to get. Now one of these writes really well, one of them needs a little bit of help. So let's see which one this is. Alright, so this is going to be the white gel pen. It shows up really, really nice on black paper, which I love. But aside from that, you can actually do your little watercolors, and then you can actually do doodling inside the watercolors, which is just a fun little activity to do, but also it's just kind of a really great idea if you're wanting just to kind of make it look more exciting and more fun. You can also, so this is called a Uniball. This pen, it's a white Uniball. It also comes in black. This is Jay's and Taylor's favorite pen. It's really funny. The other day, Taylor went to grab a pen from the drawer. I said, oh, can you give me a pen? And he pulled out his favorite pen, and I kind of looked, and I said, I'm sorry, it wasn't very clear, but I actually don't like that pen very much. But I mean, it's a great pen. I do love it. But when I'm like going to grab like a favorite pen, or if like I just need a plain old pen, I usually don't grab this one because I consider this to be a little bit more of an artistic pen versus an everyday pen. But like I said, Jay and Taylor, this is their favorite one. But what's nice about it is because it is a Uniball, you get this really nice dark black line. It's really a beautiful option, and it's nice dark colors. But when we're doing this technique where you're doodling on top of the watercolors, if you want a nice black pen that just rolls right across the top of the watercolors, this is a wonderful option for that. And it is a really nice doodling pen if you love to doodle, because the flow is just really nice and wonderful. And again, you get some like really nice nice crisp dark lines. It also, because it is a rolling pen, it's not going to bleed into your paper and kind of bleed out. It's a pigment, so it's going to sit on top of the surface because it is like a gel pen. So if you're ever trying to like, sometimes with a felt pen, when you put it on the paper and it bleeds out a little bit, the lines are not as crisp. You're always going to get really nice crisp lines with this pen. If I didn't have any other drawing pens in my life, I would probably go with this one, but I have a lot of pens in my life that I love even more, so this has now gone down the list a little bit, but I know that some people watching are like, that's my most favorite one. And so if that's the case, I will not judge. I do understand why people like it. It's just the black Uniball. So I'm just going to go back in now. I'm just going to do some more little doodling on here, my little dots. And you can also do, what's cool about these pens is you can also layer with them. So the same Uniballs come in silver and in gold. So then you can do your little drawing, or if you'd like to do like your lines, or you make like some thicker lines and things too. Just go in here and add some thicker lines. Then you can take your silver or your gold or your white and go in and add little highlight marks on top of that. So then you can actually kind of create like some different kind of layering techniques with that too. So it's actually kind of a neat kind of grouping of pens. So that's called the Uniball pen. And again, I did it on top of watercolors, but there are pens that I have used that when you do it on top of watercolors, the watercolor actually gets caught inside the little ball and it actually ruins pens. And I actually have a grouping of those that I have completely destroyed because I didn't realize there were certain pens you can write on watercolors with and certain ones that you cannot. So the other pen that I wanted to share with you guys so bad, but I have sold out, and my two that I have are almost completely out of ink, is the black Glaze pen. I love this product. I love it so much that I use them to death. Now, when you write with them, they actually write like a really nice, juicy black gel pen. And again, mine are just like almost completely gone here, so it's going to be really hard to communicate all the information. But the black Glaze pen also writes on top of acrylic paint. It is amazing. So if you've done a whole painting, then you can sign the bottom. You can also take the black pen and outline things on your acrylic painting or on rocks. It bonds to rocks, and then it sits outside. It's totally waterproof. So it's like a waterproof gel pen is how that works. But when you have these little dots, they're actually a little bit raised up and slightly textured, which is also very cool. It's almost like doing heat embossing. It is amazing. It's so much fun. I absolutely love. You agree? Yeah.
I have.
Oh, they're so good. They're so good. I actually, one of my customers, Pam, she actually came in the other day and bought all that I had in stock. So I went to look for one today, and I was like, oh, no worries, I'll grab another one. But I'm totally out. So I wanted to show you guys more with this, but my pens are just out of ink. Yes. Oh, you have a couple of them? Yeah. They're so good. They're so good. Okay, so now I'm going to move into a little bit more of a realm of markers. We'll go back to more of these other pens, but I'm just showing all of my favorite things right now. So I did do a little demonstration on using the brush markers a little while ago, and for those people that may have missed it or are not sure what the brush markers are about, I just wanted to give you a little bit more of a guidance and information about that. So the brush pens, traditionally, they have a brush tip on them, and with a heavy hand you get the thicker line, and with a thin hand you get a fine point line, which is really nice if you're wanting to do a variety of different kinds of art techniques, because then you can go in and add, you know, a gal the other day, she draws and colors anime, and so these pens are really great because you can get that really nice shadow line, the thicker lines, but also you can get the fine point lines, which is really nice. Whereas you have the Tombows, to get the fine point line, you usually just have to use the other bullet size tip versus the brush tip. These ones, you just use a heavy hand or you have a light hand. When you have a light hand, you can actually get a really nice fine point line, which is really similar in comparison to the Tombow. The other reason I like the Karen brush markers so much is because the brush tip itself holds up really well. Oftentimes with the Tombows, the brush tip over time splays out a little bit, and I learned that's because if you write on cheaper paper, they splay out faster. So if you have higher quality paper, your Tombow tips are going to hold up better. That was something I did not realize. So when you have a tip that's kind of splaying out, it's most likely because you've gotten paper fibers from inexpensive paper that have been trapped in the brush tip, and so then it starts to damage the tip. These Karen brush markers, the tip holds up very nicely, though I still recommend writing on higher quality paper. Okay. Then the coolest part about these pens is the tip-to-tip technique, which I have probably demonstrated a million times just in the last month, but it's just one of my favorite things. So you're actually supposed to touch the tip-to-tip on these pens, and the reason why is because the pen has the ink up here, so it's actually self-cleaning. So when you write with it, you actually get this really amazing ombre effect, but because the pen is self-cleaning, it goes back to normal eventually, which is really nice. Because you can create some really fun lettering techniques. If you've gotten a gift certificate from someone recently, your name probably had something on it that kind of looked like this. I'm just gonna write my own name here. And then one gal that was watching me do this, she was like, oh, I love this color changing ink that you're using. And so I had to tell her, I was like, oh, it's only kind of color changing. I just used an art technique where I just put some of the one color onto the other color. But it's just a really fun look, and the blend is so perfect. It's just really nice. When I was first learning about these, I decided to go on Instagram, and I started following the hashtag Karen brush markers to see what other people are doing with the pens, and people do the most amazing art techniques. So I wanted to show you that first, so then I can show you the other cool things that Karen has come out with. They make the exact same pens in metallic. So that means that you can actually take the same techniques where you get the thick line and you get the thin line, but then you can also do that amazing brush technique that I love to do, with kind of like the splash marks, which I also like to do with the other pens I was showing you there. But then you can also take your metallic marker, color on a piece of plastic, and then use your water brush to pick up the color, and then you have metallic watercolor, which is also just so cool because then you don't necessarily have to buy the whole metallic watercolor set. You maybe just want to do like a couple little colors, but then you can also mix your colors from the metallics. Then you get different colors of mixed metallic watercolors. So these pens are extremely versatile. Then they came out with an even more amazing option, and that is the Deco brush markers. So these are actually paint. It is a paint pen, so it is going to actually bond to all the same stuff that paint will normally bond to, like canvases and rocks, but it's in glass and plastic, but it's going to be totally waterproof when dry, which is really fun. So when we were out of town, and I actually went to this little stationery shop. If you're living in Wenatchee, Pickle Papers is the place. She's amazing. They had these there, and they were the newest pen made by this company. Again, it is a brush tip, so you can do all the same techniques I was just showing you, but then once it's dry, it's dry. It's totally waterproof. But the tip-to-tip technique you can also do. So you can even, so if you paint on like wood or on canvases and you're wanting to blend your colors out, it's really easy to do with these pens. So let's say you have like yellow on one side and you have orange on the other side. Then you're thinking, well, how do you get that really perfect blend? You just color from one onto the other. Then you start at the darker color and move your way this way. And then you get that perfect blend, which is amazing. It's so beautiful. And when I started looking online and seeing what people are doing these amazing fine art techniques using these pens because they get that beautiful blend, and they're lettering. Oh my gosh. And then they started using the metallics to add like shadow marks onto their pens. And then the people would use the metallics with their deco brushes to get the metallic deco brush. It's just, it completely blew my mind. So if there is a pen that I would recommend playing with, cannot express enough how much I love these pens. They are just so much fun. So that's the world of Karen brush markers. Okay, now we're going to move into one of these new pens that I have not played with at all. So this is a pen that Christy had actually recommended for, it was Christy's class that she was doing. She was teaching a lettering class where it was called, I want to say it was the Newland hand, I want to say, but she was the very chunky letters. And so she recommended this size of pen because you get that really thick line, but then you can go in with a thin line. And I'm just going to write the word kites here because I started with the letter K and that's the first word that comes to mind here. So if you are someone that likes to do calligraphy or you're wanting to kind of practice doing calligraphy, this is a really great pen for that because you get that nib style, but you don't have to worry about having to dip anything into any ink. The thing about the chisel tip is that it definitely is a learning curve. And again, I'm not super talented at doing calligraphy, which is why I personally lean more towards the brush pens. But the chisel tip is really wonderful because then you can really get that calligraphy kind of a style, and because you can go up on the fine point tip and actually draw with that too. So it is a nice pen for those people wanting to dabble in the world of calligraphy, but are not feeling confident enough yet to dip into the ink. And when you have the nib where you dip it into the ink, I'm just going to warn you, for those of you curious, it is a learning curve for sure, because you have to put the right amount of ink on the paper, the right angle of the nib. When I'm practicing, I have gotten the blot of ink many, many times. So a chisel tip is a great way to go if you're heading in the direction of calligraphy, but you're not quite to the dip into the ink style quite yet. Okay? All right, since we're talking about some of my other favorite pens here, let me talk about my most favorite pen ever, and that's the Fudenosuke brush pen. It is the best. I probably have said that about every single pen here, but it is one of my all-time favorites. It's referred to as a hard brush tip. What it is you do have the brush tip style. With a light hand, you get the thin line, but with a heavy hand, you get these thicker lines. And what I love about this is my favorite doodling pen. It dries very, very quickly because it is a felt point. But what's cool about this is that it's totally waterproof, which means that I can go back in and I can do like my watercolors or my lines. Oops, that was my paint pen there. You can go back in and do, this is the one I want. And you can color over it. I still had green on here from earlier. There we go. You can color over it and your lines aren't going to go anywhere. They're just going to stay right there, which is really, really nice. But then you can also, so when I'm doing like drawing and doodling and I'm wanting to add like little details, like let's say if I'm going to draw like a little mouse guy or something and I want like his cute little face in here, what I will find is that I really love using, my mouse is not very well drawn, but I love it because I can get the thick lines and the thin lines. I don't have to go back over and thicken up my lines over and over again. I can just draw at ease. So this is my favorite drawing pen. Yes, questions?
I just want to see what it is.
Yeah, oh, and you're welcome to test that out there. It's just really nice. It is a Japanese style pen. Like I said, it's called the Fudenosuke, F-U-D-E-N-O-S.
I'll have to get one before I leave.
Yeah, let me just, F-U-D-E-N-O-S-U-K-E. Fudenosuke, yeah. Yeah, it's really fun, and I'm going to actually start carrying these in open stock because I use them so regularly. Also, that technique where I was showing you the brush tips, you can actually kind of create a similar kind of idea where you do the splash marks. where you just kind of do a tiny little idea here. So, but anyways, my favorite pen, for sure, definitely one of my all-time favorite ones. And the fact that it's waterproof is great.
You don't have it in stock.
I do have them in stock, but I will also be carrying them in open stock on the front counter because I use them so often. But they're a great pen. I sell those guys for $4.25 a piece. Okay, this is just a quick little, wanted to share with you that it's a novelty pen, but it's actually a really nice quality novelty pen. Do you have one of these with the unicorn or the rainbow? So when I first got these, I was actually thinking to myself, I was like, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of this pen. I mean, I love the novelty style, but sometimes I'm like, oh, they're more for kids. But honestly, it's a good quality pen. Yes, the flow is beautiful. I mean, and I would say if you're gonna have a pen in your purse, the Wiku style, yeah, most people have these, but because the ink stays wet a little bit longer, of course you might accidentally smear it. These ones, the flow is perfect. There's no like chunkiness or anything. It's just a really nice option. However, I am curious to know if this one will have the same kind of techniques where you can do heat embossing. So let's find out together. All right, so it was right. Can it emboss? Can it emboss? I'm just gonna write a little thing and we're about ready to find out if it's gonna work or not. Oh, do you have yours in there? Yay! Oh, the best ones, the glitter pens. Oh, these are these write in a very similar fashion. I don't know if I told you this, Margot. Mine ran out of ink because I used it so much. I used it to death. But I can't throw away the pen because I have the same one.
I love the flow.
Oh, the flow is so good. It is so good.
And I have the other two glitter pens.
Yes.
Silver and gold.
Yes. Oh, they're so amazing. Okay, so I just used this plain old novelty pen. Turns out the embossing powder does stick to it, so that means you can do embossing with any of your plain old ballpoint pens. So that's just so cool. I just absolutely love that. Now you guys have already seen the techniques, but I figured since the embossing powder is already on there, you might as well put it on there. But I love knowing that there's other pens out there that you can do heat embossing with. It's just so cool. All right, so more of a novelty pen. All right, then let's talk about glossy paper. So this is kind of a glossy, it's called chrome coat with a K, chrome coat paper. So we were talking about heat embossing. Heat embossing will stick to anything that's wet. So if you have a pen that you're writing on glossy paper and it doesn't dry, that's okay because you can heat emboss it. So your plain pens, which normally on normal paper, the Caron brush markers, they dry immediately. Once they're dry, I mean, once you've written it down, it's dry. It's not, you can't emboss it, it's dry. But on the glossy paper, I wanted to see if this ink would bond to it. And so when I was doing this, and I was playing around, then I was waiting forever for it to dry, and it never wanted to dry. And so I thought, oh my gosh, why don't we just heat emboss it? Oh no, I forgot clear embossing powder. Hey Jay, yeah. Can you bring me my clear embossing powder, please? Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'll just write a little sentiment here while I'm waiting. Also, sometimes when you write on glossy paper, you'll find that your ink starts to bead up a little bit. This ink, surprisingly, does not bead up as much as you might think. It does spread out just a little bit, but you can still read the writing no problem at all. Jay, do you know where the clear embossing powder is?
Oh, the clear one is.
Isn't that the container? Yeah. The Tupperware?
Oh.
Right. Yay, that's the one. Thank you.
Yes, achieved.
There we go. Perfect. All right. So I've had people ask me why you would ever buy clear embossing powder, and it's for this exact reason. If you ever have an ink or a pen or something that does not dry on certain papers, you can always take your clear embossing powder and heat set it, and it will actually bond to the ink, and then it will make it waterproof. I'm noticing some of my ink already dried on here, which is amazing. All right, so what's happened here is that where the clear embossing powder stuck, that made the entire ink a little bit darker. The areas where it dried on the chrome coat, amazingly, I didn't realize it would dry on here, it's actually lighter color. So you get this really kind of very cool kind of tone on tone effect, which actually is really neat. I did not realize that was going to happen, but I'm totally loving it. All right. So then, we'll talk about, oh, we already did these. So, oh yeah, the Uniball also comes in red, just for information for you. The Uniball was what we had done this little palette with here. So you could also go in and add some red to it if you wanted to. Uniball pens come in white, silver, gold, black, red, and blue. I don't have the blue in stock right now, but I probably will bring that in eventually. Okay, so then, for those of you that are not familiar, the parallel pens are a fountain pen that actually has ink that goes in from the back side. So this little ink on the back side has a little blister, so you press it in, and then the ink is actually flowing through two pieces of metal. There are two pieces of metal here that the ink flows through, so that's where the name parallel comes from. And so with parallel pens, you get that thick line, but you can also get a thin line, which is really neat. And if you have, the nib size that's on the tip is predetermined, so you can't change it out. But personally, I own a couple of the different pens, and you can always change the ink out to different colors. But my favorite part about these pens is if you have two of them, you can, and they're two different colors ink, you can color one color onto the other color, and then you get this amazing ombre two-tone effect. And because that ink is only at the very top there, the pen does eventually go back to its original color ink. But the effect is just absolutely so cool, because then your handwriting can be double toned, which is amazing. So I really, really love that. Now Susie, she's a teacher here. She is always really big on using the parallel pens in new and different ways. I have seen her take these empty little bottles here and fill them up with other stuff, and then has different kinds of ink that flow through the pens. I was blown away. And so she teaches a class called Demystifying the Parallel Pen, where she puts the most unusual materials in the pen, but then you can do other things with them, and certain types of ink that actually are sticky, then you can apply like Pearl-Ex powder and things to them, so then your writing is then gilded. But she also does these really cool things where you can actually just make like little like squares and little shapes and things like this, and adding like little borders. And I just love that she does stuff like that, because she's really trying to take you outside of the standard realm of using your parallel pen and saying, hey, you can actually do some fun and different things that maybe you've never considered before. Now, I'm not as pristine and perfect as she is, but just wanted to give you that information that if you have a parallel pen or a fountain pen that has a predetermined nib size on there, you can actually do different stuff with them versus just your plain old lettering. So just wanted to give you that information, because when I first saw the parallel pen, I'm thinking one world, oh, you just do it for calligraphy, and Susie was the one that said, hey, think outside the box. There's a whole world that you can do with just one pen. So just wanted to give you guys that information. Okay, now this, I have a couple more pens to share with you. So this is my other favorite pen. I have so many favorite pens, but I really, really love this. It's called the Slicci, S-L-I-C-C-I. It is the finest line gel pen I have ever used in my life. And this is a standard pen from earlier. This is the comparison. It is so skinny, and it dries immediately. Even though it's waterproof, it dries so fast. But because it's a gel pen, you're not going to get that spread out from the felt tip that you would find. But when I'm doing like detail work or wanting to write like a tiny little note, like for my fairy friends, like if I write tiny little messages to my fairy friends, I will write little itty bitty notes. And this is so great because it's super tiny. So you can really get lots of fine line letters. I mean, it is tiny. The tip is so little, but it is absolutely, because I love to do detailed, tiny, fine line work. I use this pen, and I was absolutely shocked that it was one so fine point, but the fact that it's a gel pen, but it doesn't smear at all, is very cool. So actually, I had some custom stamps made from Steve a while back, and I used this pen, and he was like, that might be too fine line for making a stamp, but we were still able to do it, even though it was very fine line work. But one of my all-time favorite drawing pens. Personally, I would say that I use this one and this one probably the most often at this point. And then my third most used would probably be my Glaze pen. But I would say that these are probably the three pens that I want to always have available to me all the time when it comes to the world of drawing. But the Slicci, it also comes in a ton of colors. Oh, it's so good. It's a great pen. All right, Le Pen, L-E-P-E-N. This is just a nice everyday writing pen. I sell them for $1.90. It's just a nice fine point pen. The fact that you can get just nice fine line work. This you can draw on top of other things, like on top of watercolors, because it is a felt point tip. I'm just going to quickly put some watercolor down here, as you can see. But also the lip pens come in every color, which is really, really wonderful. They have, I would say that there are probably a good, at this point, 20 colors out. They even have like a vibrant set, which is really nice, which I really love. There's like some neon sets. They did come out with a yellow one. Personally, I don't own the yellow one because you can't really see yellow very well on paper, but they do make it. A little bit more. And the lip pens also are really great for little gifts for people. People come in all the time looking for little presents for like for kids and things, and I thought that this was a really nice option because it is so fine point, but then kids can really do like their doodling and their drawing or write their names or whatever it is that they would like to do. But they are just really great, fun, colorful pens, very vibrant, and as far as I know, light fast even, because I haven't had any issues with the ink fading. Though don't hold me to that information. I just, from my personal experience, I haven't had any issues with it fading. But yeah, you can even write on top of watercolors, which is really great. You can go in and do your lining. Again, it's just a really nice doodling pen, but it does dry right away, so because it is a felt point. But it is a wonderful pen, inexpensive. Yes.
Slicky?
This is not a slicky.
Oh.
This is the Le Pen. L-E-P-E-N. Le Pen. Like French. Le Pen.
You have to get one of those for me.
Yeah, they're really nice, and they, like I said, they're very inexpensive, but it's a great way to go. I might be out of black, but I have black coming. It should be here any day. Okay, so the last and final pen that we're going to demonstrate here is going to be the new one. So this is called the Kiritaki, K-U-R-E-T-A-K-E, so it's another Japanese pen, and it's the Zig, and they call it clean color. They call it the real brush because the tip is actually a paintbrush. Again, I haven't used this yet, so I'm just trying this out just to kind of see what I can create here. So it appears to be an actual paintbrush kind of a tip. So you're actually getting kind of this paintbrush kind of a stroke kind of a look, which is really interesting. Again, this is the first time I'm playing with it. I wonder if I can shake it. It does not appear that I can, but the color is really vibrant. And I actually really like that it actually has kind of a brush tip kind of a style, and not a brush tip like the Karen markers, because this is actually a felt tip that's in the brush shape. This is actually paintbrush bristles in here, which is really, really fascinating. So you're actually, so that's what's happening here, is that you're seeing these kind of brush marks. And now that my pen is a little bit more saturated, I'm getting a little bit of a cleaner stroke here. But I think this is just kind of an interesting pen. Also, it is actually really vibrant, which I really like. So the brush tip is significantly softer, so it's a little bit more flexible, significantly more flexible than our traditional brush pens. And I'm noticing when I usually use my Karen brush pens, I can get these really nice splash marks that are really fine point. This is not going to work in the same fashion, because if you try to do that, you can see the bristles want to kind of pull out a little bit. So I would say if this was a pen that you were wanting to use, it would be really great for kind of testing, like doing some interesting kind of writing and calligraphy, or you can go in and add maybe like some detail onto a piece of work that you're already working with. I'm also actually really curious to know if this is waterproof, because I haven't played with it yet. So first off, let's see if it'll move with water. It has blue on it. Okay, so you can do watercolors with it, which is wonderful. So it does move with water. And then let's see if we can get this. Ooh, this is kind of cool because you kind of get this light and dark kind of tones here. So you can actually, let's see if we can pull this out a little bit. You might be able to pull that out just ever so slightly because it does move with water a little bit. So kind of an interesting pen, but just something a little different. So if you're wanting to kind of play with a fun pen, you may enjoy playing with the new clean color real brush Kiritaki. So there we have it. So I have given you all of my knowledge on the pens that I currently have in stock. So there we have it. Okay, so I hope you guys had fun. Hope you guys learned some things, maybe got some inspiration, learned how to use your new brush pens in different ways, learned about a couple new pens, heat embossing, watercoloring with your Tombow markers, doodling on top of watercolors, all of your brush tip styles, the Food No Suki, which I know this is not a great sample of it, but again, one of my favorite pens. And then of course, doing the mica powder with your standard pen. So lots of fun things. Thanks for joining me for demo, friends. I'll see you guys later.